Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? Today I want to do something a little bit different. If you haven't heard by now, there's we'll call it a program online called ChatGPT. And the cool part about this is that you can kind of just ask it all kinds of questions and see how much it knows. And it's described as being a model that actually interacts conversationally. And it allows you to ask follow-up questions, and it supposedly can admit its mistakes or whatever. So I wanted to put some of that to the test to see if it actually does what it says it does and how much it might actually know about Magic the Gathering. So let's hop in and see what this ChatGPT can tell us about Magic. All right, now for starters, I've used other types of programs like this, but not this particular one. This is the most popular, honestly, the most extensively, I would say, researched and I guess capable of a lot of the others. So let's start by asking them something that we might find interesting. Like what's the most important card in Magic? All right, so it comes back and says the answer to this question is subjective, which is actually correct, and can vary depending on the format, deck, and player strategy. However, some of the most powerful and commonly played cards in Magic Gathering are Black Lotus, Sol Ring, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Liliana, Tormagorf, Swords of Plowshares, Force of Will, Brainstorm, Lightning. This is actually really good. Like, this is actually pretty accurate, right? Because it did say most powerful and most commonly played. So that applies to pretty much all these cards on the list. So that's actually pretty cool. Let's see, can we ask it maybe what city held the first Magic the Gathering tournament? It says the first Magic the Gathering tournament was held in Seattle, Washington, USA in 1993. That makes sense because Wizards in Renton, Washington, so that's probably accurate. What else do we want to know about this? Like, let's ask it, what is the best one mana creature in Magic? It says the best one mana creature in Magic the Gathering can vary depending on format and player strategies, but some of the most commonly played and powerful options are Goblin Guide, Wild in the Cattle, Noble Hierarch, Land of War Elves, Birds of Paradise, Dark Confidant. Well, it got it almost right. Like, Dark Confidant is actually not correct. However, if you notice, it does work conversationally. So now that we're talking about Magic, it knows that we're going to be asking Magic-related questions. It says, again, these are just some examples. So I'm going to correct it and say, are you sure that Dark Confidant is a one mana creature? It says, no, I apologize. It's not a one mana creature. It costs 2 mana. Thank you for pointing that out. So that's kind of creepy. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's a little weird, right? That it responds also conversationally, which isn't like the worst thing. But the fact that it says like, oh, my bad. Right? You're right. It's not 1 mana. It's 2 mana. It understood that, oh, you're right. I put a thing in there that's not right after looking it up because I questioned it and it came back correct. Now let's ask it something that's a little more nebulous, right? Like, how much money can you win playing Magic? So this is actually interesting. This took probably, well, but for sure it took the longest of any question to come back with a response. It took about almost a minute. Then it said the amount of money that can be won for Magic varies greatly, depending on the tournament, the format. So it did get the information right, but my guess is here that this was actually going and digging through, trying to find Magic tournaments, discerning the prizes that were awarded or whatever, and then formulated its response, which is actually very interesting because the others, like I said, came back very quickly, but this is one that, because there's not a simple answer, it looked like it almost went and did more research, which is kind of cool if that's actually what's happening under the hood. Now let's get into some fan stuff. Like, what is the most expensive piece of Magic art? Now, this response came back almost instantly. I hit enter and then this came up. So I don't know, and this is kind of the cool part. I don't know if it's already searching for Magic facts because it knows we're talking about Magic, or if this is just a thing that it knew to look for very quickly and was able to gather the information. But it says the most expensive piece of Magic Gathering art can vary because of the value of the art determined by various factors. But it says as of 2021, which is its knowledge cutoff, Black Lotus painting by Christopher Rush sold for over 114, Library of Alexandria sold for 80K, and Mox Sapphire sold for 50,000 in 2020. So yeah, some facts that went and looked up. I haven't verified these, but it looks like these are accurate. But I will actually challenge it. Let's just ask, are you sure that was the price for the Mox Sapphire art? So it did apologize and say the information it may not be up to date, but it says exact prices again may vary, but it can change due to current market value. So it's basically saying in this where it apologized outright for the Dark Confidant being incorrect information. In this case, it's kind of saying like, well, I gave you the best I had, but be aware that, that was 2020, so prices could vary if you were looking for a current price on it. So this is actually pretty cool that it even knows in its apology, like, hey, when I have to give new information, or hey, here's my apology, let me explain though why I gave you the answer I did. So it's actually a little bit of extra work put in there, how it even formulates the conversation or the response to be conversational and still take in the new information. All right, let's see if there's another factor. Like, what was the first store to sell Magic the Gathering? Now, this is interesting because it took about 15 or 20 seconds to find a response. And then it came back and said the first store to sell Magic the Gathering was a store called The Other Side in Seattle, Washington. And then other stores like this popularized the game, yada yada. So that actually is pretty accurate. I have no reason to challenge that. If I were looking up for research, I would be like, yeah, that sounds about right. It's in Wizard's backyard. It was 1993. That all makes sense. I don't think that'd be a challengeable thing unless I just happen to know outright that it was not incorrect. Now let's ask it something else. If it knows what is the rarest Magic card. And I'm asking this because it's a bit of a trick question, right? Because we all know that Black Lotuses are highly sought after, but they're not actually the most rare. So let's see what it comes back with, because it actually immediately came back with it. It says the rarest Magic the Gathering card can vary. So it's coming back with like Alpha Lotus, blah, 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 blah. So these actually are not the most rare cards. There's stuff like the Fukushikajin Dragon, I believe, that is in Japan. I believe that's a 1 of 1. The first Magic the Gathering World Champion got a card. That's a 1 of 1. We also have cards that are made for Wizards of the Coast employees for yearly team rewards where they get to make a card and it's given to everybody on the team. And there's those, plus I think the production copies and maybe 1 or 2 higher ups get them. So those are also going to be much more rare than a Black Lotus. Plus there's stuff that Richard Garfield made for employees and friends, and like those things are also going to be super rare because there's like maybe a couple 100 of those out in the world. So a lot of the stuff. So I'm going to do a follow-up and say, aren't the Richard Garfield cards more rare? So it says you are correct. I apologize for the oversight in my previous answer. The Richard Garfield cards are a set of cards that were assigned and stamped by Magic the Gathering creator Richard Garfield and are considered among the rarest Magic the Gathering cards. These cards are highly sought by collectors and can command high prices due to their rarity. So I'm not sure it got that totally right because I've seen a couple of the Richard Garfield cards and I don't remember them being stamped. I don't think they were stamping Magic cards back then. So these are times where the AI doesn't get the information completely correct. Like it knows facts, and I'm sure it's checking websites, and some of these things are mentioned, so it knows that these are rare, but it doesn't necessarily get all the details right, especially if a couple of sites are giving incorrect information. But in this case, I'm going to try to keep it conversational, say, but this still isn't as rare as the Shichi Fukujin Dragon, and see what it says. All right, so it came back pretty quickly and says, yes, you are correct. The Shichi Fukujin Dragon is a one-of-a-kind Magic the Gathering card that is considered to be the rarest Magic card. The card was created as a special promotional item, and only 1 copy was produced, making it the rarest and one of the most valuable Magic cards in existence. Due to its rarity and uniqueness, the Dragon card is highly sought after by collectors and command a high price if it would ever come up for sale. Probably won't ever be for sale. But now this is interesting because I've asked this, they can add this to its knowledge database now that it's had to go look for that information. I would venture to guess that if somebody else were to follow up and ask, what is the most rare Magic the Gathering card, or what is a one-of-a-kind Magic the Gathering card, it would probably give you this as a response. Now, I don't know if it'll do that for me, but I'm going to try that. I'm going to ask, what are all of the one-of-a-kind Magic cards? All right, so this is another response. It took about a minute to get a response back, but it says, there are several one-of-a-kind Magic the Gathering cards, also known as playtest cards or promo cards, which are not the same thing, so it definitely did not get that correct. Shichi Fukujin Dragon, Victoria from Ice Age, Garland of Bliss from Invasion, Richard Garfield's Personal, Lotus, and Ancestral, Ty Paris' original copy of the Time Spiral Time Shifted cheat. I don't even know what that last one is, to be honest, so I might have just learned something, but this also shows there's a bit of a problem, right, with how it's gathering information, because if a lot of people haven't given it accurate things or challenged things, it doesn't know this information isn't correct. So here it's telling us that playtest cards and promo cards are the same thing when they're actually vastly different. And something it just told us, like the Shichifukujin Dragon, was a promotional piece, so I guess technically it's a promo card, but it's not really what the average Magic player would call a promo card. It does put promo in quotes, so it can count for multiple things, but it's really interesting. Now, here's an interesting thing I want to try. Let's say, because I make a lot of content for Standard, right? So let's say we wanted to go to a tournament tomorrow at our local store and said, I want to play, I don't know, let's say a Golgari Graveyard deck. Let's ask it what the best Golgari Graveyard deck is in Standard. All right, so here's something we're running into as a problem. So you can't necessarily use this for deck building because it says the best Golgari Graveyard decks in Standard can vary, blah, blah, blah. But its knowledge cutoff again is 2021. So it says the most popular and successful Golgari Graveyard deck in Standard includes cards such as Stitcher Supplier, Creeping Chill, Doom Whisperer, Vraska, Find and Finality, which is kind of correct if we're talking about 2020, 2021 Magic, right? But we're not. So let's see if it can find something on the internet. I don't know how it works. Maybe it doesn't. It just says its knowledge base is 2021. Maybe it can't find anything for 2022 even. So let's say, what is the best Golgari Graveyard deck for current Standard? All right, so as we suspected, it says, hey, I'm sorry, my training data only goes to 2021. I don't have information on the current Standard format. Now, let's try something else. Let's say, okay, it doesn't know about current Standard, right? We've assessed that. So let's pick a legendary creature from the last couple of years and ask it if it can give us the top 10 cards for that type of build in, say, a Brawl deck. I also want to pick one that's not overly great. So let's ask, what are the top 5 most popular cards for Thalia Guardian of Thraben Brawl deck? So it says a Thalia Guardian of Thraben deck typically focus on disruptive elements and board control, which is true if you were going to play that. These are some of the top 5 most popular cards. And it says, obviously, Thalia Guardian of Thraben. He says that's the commander of the deck and the key to the disruptive strategy. Stonecoil Serpent, and it even says why. A flexible creature that can grow big and act as removal, which it really doesn't. Stonecoil Serpent is not a removal creature. Core Sanctifier is a strong creature that can make attacking difficult for opponents. I don't think that's what Core Sanctifiers does. Core Sanctifiers destroys an artifact or an enchantment. So it definitely didn't get that right. Castle Ardenvale, mana fixing land that also provides creatures. Okay. And Walking Ballista, a flexible artifact creature that can act as removal or as a finisher. That's true. So it got 2 of the things wrong. So I'm not even sure you can lean on this for deck building just yet. I will ask it though, is Stonecoil Serpent really a removal creature? Okay, so it clarifies by saying the Stonecoil Serpent can act as a form of removal in certain situations, which I would still challenge that, as its modular ability allows it to grow in size and potentially kill opposing creatures through combat or deal lethal damage to an opponent. By that definition, technically every creature is removal, which is not a thing. So here, I think it's still not discerning the actual definitions or the language of Magic the Gathering. And I think that's going to be kind of the shortcomings of this for a little bit, where it has to know the terminology of the thing you're asking, because otherwise the words may not have the same meaning to an AI. I'm also going to follow up and ask, how does Core Sanctifiers make attacking difficult for your opponent? Yes, this says Core Sanctifiers is a creature that has the ability to make attacking difficult for opponents by tapping down their creatures. Its ability reads, tap 2 untapped creatures you control, tap target creature. This allows the player to tap down an opponent's attacking creature, making it unable to deal damage. Core Sanctifiers is a 3-mana 2/3 with kicker, and when it enters the battlefield, if you kicked it, you destroy target artifact or enchantment, which is what I thought it was. So now we have a situation because the AI actually went and looked up information that not only was incorrect, it's now doubling down on this information being incorrect. So now I have to ask it, isn't Core Sanctifiers the card that destroys artifacts and enchantments? So this is a very strange response. It says, you are correct, after I asked the question. And it says, my apologies for making the mistake in my previous answer. Core Sanctifiers is actually a card that has the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, not tap down the opponent's creatures. It's also interesting that it says tap down. So it is using some of the language or nomenclature, I guess, that we would use as Magic players. But it says its ability reads, still repeating the incorrect thing. Tap to untap creatures you control. Exile target artifact or enchantment. That is not this card at all. This allows the player to remove problematic permanents from board. So I'm not even sure what's going on here now. Like, I thought maybe it was looking up a different core card, and maybe they were on the same pages that it was reading. But now I've said, hey, are you sure this is correct? Because this card generally does this. And it says, oh, you're right. And then it's now taking its original interpretation and combining it with the explanation and making up another ability. And this is kind of going to be the shortcoming of this sometimes, is that I don't know if this is going to be a resource. Let's say somebody new wanted to build a deck, if they could just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to build this deck. Can you give me some cards? So here I'm going to try something else and say, are you sure? Because I still don't think that's the correct wording for the card. So now it's gotten worse because I said, are you sure? I still don't think that's the correct wording for core sanctifiers. It says, oh, I apologize. It seems like I made another mistake. And I'm thinking, great. And then it says, you are correct. Core sanctifiers does not have the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, which it absolutely does. My apologies for the confusion. So now I'm going to say, hey, I think you're still wrong. I think it has the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, but not tap down creatures. All right, and I worded that very specifically. I said, I think you're still incorrect. I think it has the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantments, but does not have the ability to tap down creatures. And says, I apologize, you're correct. Core Sanctifiers has the ability to destroy artifacts and enchantment, but does not have the ability to tap down creatures. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure to review the card information more thoroughly in the future. So, what was that? I think 5 interactions to get to a correct wording or an understanding of correct wording for core sanctifiers. Now, again, under the hood, I don't know what's going on or where it's getting some of this information or what websites it was looking up. My guess is, though, it was cross-referencing too many cards and just got the wrong things that it reported. However, if somebody doesn't have that advanced knowledge, they're not going to know that it's incorrect, and that creates a problem. Not necessarily just for Magic, but it could happen for other things too. It could be if you want to repair something on your computer or a car part or whatever, it could make a recommendation for a wrong thing. So you still would want to consult an expert or at least a highly verified site. Now let's have a little bit more fun with some suggestive stuff. Let's ask it, who should I watch on YouTube for standard MTG Arena content? Now it does say here are some popular content creators on YouTube who specialize in standard MTG Arena. Telegram Community College, Agent Avenger, MTG Arena Zone, Mythic Mots, MTG Goldfish. While those are popular channels, they don't necessarily specialize in standard. So I'm going to ask again more specifically. And I'm asking it this way because it just may not know if I was looking for Magic the Gathering videos or particularly standard videos. And it really can't discern that as it turns out. It's still looking for just some of the most popular Magic the Gathering channels. Even though I didn't say Magic specifically, I said standard format, it still knows we're talking about Magic, and it's just recommending highly viewed Magic channels to me. So that's a little tough, because if you were looking for something, it can't help you find that. You kind of have to still go to the sites and search within their regular SEO parameters. So this is actually kind of eye-opening to know kind of what the limitations are here and what it is and isn't capable of doing. Now, just to see how well it researches, I'm going to ask it what PowrDragn's most popular video is on YouTube. It says it couldn't find PowrDragn on YouTube. Now I know it's BS because I've been doing stuff since 2020. So yeah, so I don't know what type of database it's using, because there, I would think it would just be able to go to YouTube, search PowrDragn, maybe even do a quick search of my channel, see what the most popular video is. Or even if it took information from 2020, 2021, it would just say whatever the most popular video was of that up to that point, wherever its database cutoff is. So even then, it wasn't able to do it. So now I have a lot of questions on where the information's coming from or why it's referencing certain things. Because again, it was able to search, these are the most popular Magic the Gathering channels, so it knows something about that, but couldn't find different individual creators that weren't one of the biggest channels. And I guess back, maybe if the cutoff was 2021, I would have had like 10,000 subscribers or something, maybe 15. So it would be large enough that I think there would be at least a sample size that it could easily research it, but it didn't. So that's something else to note. So I'm going to do a follow-up and see if I can correct it and say PowrDragn has been making content on YouTube since 2020. So now this is even stranger, right? Because I gave it a year to check and says, hey, this person's been doing content since February 2020. And it says, I apologize, as a language model, I don't have access to the latest information, and my training data only goes up until 2021. I cannot provide information on the most popular video for a content creator that was active after my training cutoff. However, you may be able to find this information, blah, blah, blah. So now I'm wondering if maybe whatever data set went into this, its cutoff was on 2021, but maybe the data they actually inputted was even prior to that. So it doesn't even know that my channel exists, because I really didn't until like late 2019, early 2020. So if it only got YouTube info, let's say up until 2019 at some point, then I wouldn't be in there. So this is actually kind of giving us more information I wasn't expecting. So we kind of took a weird left turn here, but it's actually kind of cool to know. And then let's just ask a couple of fun questions on the way out. Like, what's the largest Magic the Gathering store in the world? So it actually is correct. It says it's difficult to determine the largest Magic the Gathering stores in the world, which makes sense because I know several stores that are all different sizes, and some of them are quite large. But it says, that being said, some of the largest, most well-known retailers are Card Kingdom, Star City Games, and Channel Fireball, which all have operated their own retail spaces as well as giant warehousing for shipping stuff. So those are not incorrect answers. Not really what we were looking for, but it wouldn't be wrong if somebody wanted to quote those. So let's ask, what's the largest attendance for a Magic event? So this says the largest attended Magic Gathering event is believed to be 2019 Magic Gathering World Championships, which was held in Honolulu and had an estimated attendance of over 2,000 players, which we know isn't even close to the largest one. It talks about the Magic World Championships or whatever. It says it can be hard to discern the number. Not actually, because those have an actual number of people that participated. We can look it up. So that part, it's kind of just giving you the boilerplate, like, it can vary, depends on these factors. So I'm going to say, well, what about the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Weren't those larger? So this is interesting. It says that it acknowledges that the Grand Prix are large-scale tournaments are held around the world, including Las Vegas. Some of them have high attendance and could potentially be larger than the 2019 World Championships. When we know they actually were. It doesn't know what Magic websites to look up that information on. And again, I'm not sure. I don't know where the data sets for this information comes from, what parts of the internet it was attached to. But it definitely doesn't have all of the information it doesn't have information for everything, as it turns out. And interestingly, if we search on Google that same information, it says the largest Grand Prix tournament of all time was Grand Prix Las Vegas in 2015, the Modern Masters 2015 limited event with 7,551 players. However, this event was split into 2 Grand Prix. This is interesting because it still means that Google has a deeper, I guess, resource base, because that information is being brought from the MTG wiki that talks about Grand Prix. But I'm wondering why ChatGPT also can't reference that. So just something to think about. Now, I think the question becomes, what do we do with something like this in terms of gaming? I would say if you were, say, a content creator and you just wanted to research ideas, I think it's not a bad thing to go like, hey, what in Magic does this? Or is this interesting to Magic players or whatever? And you can get into a conversational dialogue with an AI that could actually help you out, maybe brainstorm some things. But as we saw, you still kind of have to fact check it a little bit. You can't just take it for granted and just say, okay, it gave me this, so this is a machine. It obviously has to be correct. It doesn't do everything we want it to do yet. We also couldn't even use it for making deck lists, as it turns out, because it doesn't even know what all the cards do, right? We just asked for like 5 recommendations for cards to go in, and it couldn't even get that right. So it's not really built for doing the things we want to do necessarily as players. However, on a high conceptual level, it did understand some things about like rarity and promo cards and things like that. And again, some, personal perspective things. It was able to dig up some information. So I don't think it's worthless. I just think it's very interesting. It would be cool to just see some stuff that y'all might learn from trying it, or things that it got incorrect, because I'd be curious what else maybe we could have asked that was wrong. And if y'all like this type of video, let me know, because I found this to be very interesting. I know it's kind of nerdy and stupid, but if y'all are into it, let me know, because I would love to do more stuff like this, or even ask it more questions, or even find other programs that we could use to maybe learn about Magic or see what it knows about Magic. But either way, let me know. I'm curious what you would think about this, because I have no idea if y'all find this interesting or not. But if you want some random Magic facts that are helpful, here are the top 10 most expensive cards in Phyrexia, all will be one.